I'm going to show how to make this foliage effect using Affinity Photo's Procedural Texture filter. YouTuber Bob Casalova asked if I could do a foliage effect in one of the comments, so that's what I started with for this. Hadn't really done much with foliage before, and I tried a couple things before I came up with this particular effect. This is basically sort of a leafy ground cover, maybe some little flowers, or maybe those are some dead leaves down there. It makes a good leafy effect. There are other things you could do to try to create more of a mossy pattern on the background, but this is just sort of a general leafy ground cover. Now this one doesn't really make a good tree-like effect, and I may try to do that in a future video. This consists of two parts. I'm using Cell Noise 2 for the basic leaf shape, and then I'm using Perlin noise to create the different highlighted areas so it's not quite so uniform. To get started, I'll start with a new document. I'll choose XGA, but change it to 1024 by 1024 pixels, and make sure it's in RGB8 mode. Create that, fill it with black, choose the Move tool, add a live procedural texture filter, add a single equation and assign it to the three color channels, R, G, and B. And I'm going to add a real number input A for the overall scale. Size of the leaves, I'll set that to 50. I'm going to start with a variable for the coordinate system. V equals vec2, a two-element vector of relative x and relative y coordinates, so I can drag it around. And then times A, I'm going to divide by h, and h is the height of the document in pixels. A is my scale that I just put in. So there's what that looks like. That's my coordinate system. Then I'm going to create the leaf texture. Variable t1 equals a cell noise 2 of v.x and v.y. For cell noise, you have to put those in separately. And then I'll add a constant for the factor for this. This takes an external factor which will control the shape of the leaves, and that is C1. So I'll start with that. I have to add a real number input for C1, and that is the leaf shape. And I'll set that to 2. So that's the basic shape of the leaves. Now, this doesn't look too good, but if I invert that, it'll look a little more leaf-like. So if I take 1 minus this and zoom in on that, that's going to be my basic leaf shape. Now, to get the basic leaf shape, I'm going to apply a smooth step function around the cell noise. So it'll be smooth step n, and then E1 minus E2 over 4, and E1 plus E2 over 4. So that'll give me a sort of a flat area with E1, and then E2 will handle how much it rounds off. And just close that off, and I'll add two 0 to 1 sliders, one for E1 and one for E2. And E1 will be the edge, and E2 will be the edge smoothness. So I can bring this down, and I can bring this down to get flatter leaves. So those are my basic leaves. Now if I bring this up, it quickly sort of disappears, and I don't want that. One way to sort of handle that is to divide by C1 outside of the cell noise. So that makes it pretty bright, but I can bring this down, and now it's a little bit more constant with my, if I bring this down a lot, just makes it a little more consistent as I bring this up. So these could be different leaf shapes. You can get them very fine, or I'm going to go back to 2 for this one though, and I bring this up a little. Now, to make it a little more leaf-like, I'm going to add the color right here, and so that'll be a vec3 of R1, G1, and B1. And I'm going to multiply the smooth step function by that. And I have to add my color sliders, which will be 0 to 1 range inputs, R1, G1, and B1. And I want this pretty green, so I'm going to make these into green leaves. And I can add a little bit of smoothness. Now I want to be able to vary these so they aren't so uniform. And so I'm going to add some Perlin noise to this. I'll create that as a second variable, T2, and that is perlinhcubic of V, comma, 10, comma, S2. And I'll put in a 0 to 1 slider for S2, which is the Perlin smooth. There's my basic Perlin noise. Now generally I'll want this to be at a much larger size than the leaf size. So I'm going to put in a variable A2, and I'm going to divide my V in here by A2. So I can control that independently of the main scale. I want to be able to turn this on and off, so I'm going to add a variable for a fader and an offset for this. And the offset I'm going to set up to 1, and this will be my Perlin fader. And then this one will be the Perlin offset. This one I'll label I2, and this one will be OF2. And then I'm going to have I2 times this, and then plus OF2. So if I set this down to 0, I'll have no Perlin added. And then when I bring this up, I'll add more Perlin noise. I don't want this to go above 1. And I want to be able to sort of crank it up without it going above 1. So I'm going to put this in parentheses. And the reason I want to do that is I want to multiply the leaves by a something that's close to 1 in a little section, so I can get little clumps of leaves in certain sections. And to do that, I'm going to use the saturate function, which will limit it to 1 when I increase this. And I'm also going to multiply it by a constant C2 so that I can increase this. And so I'll add that constant C2, and this is Perlin saturate. So as I bring this up, it will saturate it more and more. Alright, now I've got my two factors set up, and so I'm going to just have T1 times T2, and then I want to be able to scale this. I'm just going to call it I1, which will be sort of the overall fader. So I'll add that as a 0 to 1 range input, I1, and this is the fader. So as I bring this down, I can see those leaves coming in like that. They fade out just a little bit. Now I'm going to make this, I think I'll switch this over to hcubic. So it goes positive and negative. So that's that. I can have sort of clumps of leaves like that. For now I'm just going to bring this all the way up. So that's my basic foliage pattern. Now I'm going to show how I can use this to set up a more complex scene. So first of all, I want some ground cover. And I'm going to set that up so it's sort of a dark green and a little bit of a blue-green, I think, as sort of a basic ground cover. Now I want to add some Perlin noise to this, and I'm going to add that in, and I am going to change the scale down to 1 because I want this to vary quite a bit. Bring this down. Like that. And then I want, I can also control the overall brightness. I'm going to bring that down just a little bit too. Okay, so it's starting to look nice and leafy there. And then for this Perlin smoothing factor, I'm going to crank that up until it sort of starts to distort the leaf shape here a little bit, add some Perlin noise to that. In fact, I'm going to bring this down like that, and I think I also want to have more edge smoothness on this. Okay, so it's a little bit pretty rough looking. Oh, also I'm going to bring up the number of leaves to 100. Yeah, like that. So this is just some fine ground cover that I'm going to have in the background. So that'll be sort of the background leaves that are everywhere. Now I'm going to add more layers of this until I get a real nice foliage background. Now I'm going to duplicate this to make a duplicate layer of the filter, and for the blending mode I'm going to choose lighten, and I can move these over so they're no longer lined up with each other. And for this one I'm going to build up a series of leaves now on top of this, and I think I'll start with sort of a medium green leaf. So I'll set this to 50, and I want to bring the Perlin offset all the way up to 1, and I want to bring the edge down a little bit, and I want to take off some of the smoothness, and I want to turn the fader up a little, and I'm going to make this a little brighter green. And now I don't want this everywhere, so I'm going to add back in some of the Perlin, and I'm going to take out this Perlin noise that makes it sort of rough, so it's much smoother. And give it a little more of that. Just zoom in so I can see what it's looking like a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good for a second layer of leaf. And now I think sort of a yellowish leaf. So I can label these, and this is sort of my ground cover. And this will be just a leaf green leaf, so we'll call it green. And then I'll duplicate that again. Okay, and this one I'll maybe do like 40, make it a little bigger. Bring the edges back a little bit. I'm going to change this to give it some more red and some more green. Some nice little bright spots there. Bring that up. And let's see if I bring in the edge. Okay, so I've got to move this. I can see it concentrating down there. So I'm going to move it so the origins don't line up. And I'm going to add a little more, I think, Perlin. Bring this back a little bit and bring this up a little. And I can even saturate this a little bit. And I'm going to bring the Perlin scale up so it's sort of in clumps. Okay, so there I have some nice clumps of brighter green. And now I think I'd like some, so I'm going to label this one bright green. Now I think it would look good with some little bits of red, either little flowers or leaves or berries or something like that. So I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to make these a little smaller, I think maybe like 70. And I'll just drag this around a little, make sure and I'm going to make these bright red. And I'll make, and maybe I'll change the leaf shape on these, so these will be a little bit like that. I don't want too many of them. I'll make the edge a little sharper, maybe. Okay, so that might be some euonymus starting to change color, or maybe it's a little flower. All right, and I think one more I'm going to do, and I'll just duplicate this again, and this one I'll make into yellow. So move that over. I'll bring this back to 2. I'll bring this to, I think, 50. Okay. And this one I want to be yellow, so I'm going to bring up the green. Sort of a golden leaf going on here. Like that. And that's way too much, so I'll bring my edge down like that. So I just have a few of these sort of golden leaves floating around. In any place that looks sort of dark, I can grab a bigger collection of these and drag it over to that spot. And I think I'll move some of this bright green around, so let's see, I'll put some over here. Like that. And red, put over here. So it's just sort of uniform across the image. And you could keep going with this. For this example, that's all I'm going to do. I also tried putting in some little branches, and that worked out pretty well. I might show that in a future video. So that's the foliage effect. Let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.